I just finished my first hardcore Nuzlocke. Time to play Emerald Kaizo! Wait, what's that? I shouldn't go straight from a simple vanilla game to the hardest ROM hack ever? But I'm so good! Don't do that. Just because you've played a decent amount doesn't mean you can Nuzlocke it, and for the love of Helix, don't try to Nuzlocke a ROM hack before you do anything else. I cannot stress this enough. Getting started Nuzlocking with ROM hacks is not the way to go. Let me explain some of that. Everyone knows that Pokemon Platinum is hard. Because of that, you should not try to Nuzlocke it until you've done a decent amount of other Nuzlocke stuff. I don't care if you've played it more than any other Pokemon game, unless you've played Platinum as much as MDB's played Red, don't Nuzlocke it when you're just getting started. Just don't. Trust me on this one. Well then, what game should you try to Nuzlocke first? Well, the answer is more complicated than you might think, so let's try to go through this on just a game-by-game basis. Alright, can we do each of these in less than a minute? Let's try it out. Red and Blue are terrible games to be your first Nuzlocke. They're not that hard, but they're so different from other Pokemon games. Special is one stat, so Alakazam is basically immune to all special attacks. They also have really weird AI that tries to do things in ways that just don't make any sense, and is sometimes literally random. Lastly, they're missing two types that were added in Gen 2. I could go on, but I won't. However, if they were made using modern battle mechanics, they would be pretty good entries to the first series. Foreshadowing! Gold and Silver are terrible games. Just in general. Pokemon Challenges has a really good video about why, so I'll let him do the explaining. For me, I'll just tell you why you shouldn't Nuzlocke Gen 2. They have terrible level scaling. Price has a lower level ace than Jasmine, who comes before him. Let that sink in. Also, you'll probably be underleveled unless you're a smart Nuzlocker and always grind to the level cap right before the next gym. Then, you'll be greeted to Claire, whose Pokemon have very few, if any, weaknesses you can exploit, so you'll need to get to a higher level. That's about it. Bad level scaling makes them a pain to Nuzlocke because lots of grinding. Now, I may be a bit biased on this one, but Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, while fairly difficult, are a very good first step into the world of Nuzlocking. If you're smart with your battle decisions, and you pick Mudkip as your starter, then you can play the Hone games as your first Nuzlocke pretty well. If you want a longer explanation, then you can watch this entire stream series right here through Emerald as my first ever hardcore Nuzlocke. I talk about it there. FireRed and LeafGreen. These are incredible games to be your first Nuzlocke. They're pretty easy, they do a really good job at teaching you different mechanics, and they emulate well. I know that's a factor for me, it probably is for you too. Gen 3 just emulates way better than other gens in my experience. I have no idea why. These games provide a pretty good challenge, but they're still easy enough that you can Nuzlocke them well. I know that I could say most of this about Gen 1, but in Gen 1, movesets are limited, AI is weird, and the battle mechanics are not nearly as advanced as they are now, so they don't teach you the modern game very well. I don't need to explain why you shouldn't Nuzlocke Gen 4 as your first try. They're tough as nails, slow as molasses, and really frustrating to just retry, over and over again, which you will have to do if they're your first Nuzlocke, because they are not easy games. Moving on. Heartgold and Soulsilver are pretty good games overall, so if you like Gen 2 or Johto in general, they are a good place to start. They're certainly better than actual Gen 2 for all the reasons I mentioned that FireRed and LeafGreen are better than Red and Blue. I just don't think that Johto is that good in general, but if you like it, you probably have a lot of experience in them, so they'd be a decent starting place. But unless you have a lot of nostalgia, and a ton of time on your hands to grind, they're not fantastic. I'm gonna be honest, I've never played Gen 5, so I don't know much about that era, but from what I've understand, they're fine as your first Nuzlocke, especially if you're doing a randomizer. The reason they're good for randomizers is that they have a ton of Pokemon in them, obviously, so they can give you a bunch of possibilities to run into. I hear they're pretty hard, but that's about it. If you don't have a problem with them being on 3DS, X and Y are actually pretty good entries into Nuzlocking. They have a lot of available Pokemon, and of course they're pretty easy. That's one of their biggest weaknesses as a hardcore player, but to a beginner, that makes them an excellent entry into Nuzlocks. They also have all the modern mechanics in them that you need to know for later games, and they teach those pretty well. X and Y were specifically designed to be a new beginning for the series and introduce new players to Pokemon, and they can do exactly that for Nuzlockers as well. Also, you don't have to grind in them, and everyone hates grinding. ORAS are also good entry points. They're good for all the reasons that I said Gen 3 are good, but they're both a little easier and a little newer, so they have more advanced movesets, more abilities, and of course, the EXP all making it so you don't have to grind. I really don't need to go on. Good, easier than Gen 3, more modern. Gen 7 overall, not including you, we will get to you, is overall just, it's not fantastic. It's surprisingly difficult for a recent Pokemon game, and while it certainly is a lot of fun, it isn't the best player experience. Like Gen 5, I don't have a ton of experience for them, but they have so many cutscenes early on that is another reason you might not want to play them. Tedious to start over. Let's go Pikachu and Eevee. Oh boy, do I have a lot to say here. These games are shit entries for the opposite reasons the rest of Gen 7. They try so hard to be beginner-friendly that they end up Ouroborosing themselves. They remove abilities, held items, and difficulty, making them comically bad entry points. Also, the fact that you can't battle wild Pokemon means that it becomes almost impossible to Nuzlocke them without implementing extra rules, and honestly, they're just not fun to Nuzlocke. Also, the fact that they have restrictions before gyms means that there are several points that can soft lock you in a Nuzlocke. I don't need to go on. Because of the wild area, Sword and Shield are not fantastic ways to start a Nuzlocke journey either. There's a lot of confusing stuff going on, and the fact that sometimes you'll run into strong spawns that you can't catch makes the encounters horrible. I'm not going to explain why Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, games where the Elite Four has full competitive teams, are a bad intro to Nuzlocke. Okay, I've danced around the ultimate question long enough. What's the best game to Nuzlocke first? The one that you have the most experience in. That's the game that you know the best, and therefore the game that you are best equipped to handle. No point extending this out longer than it needs to be. I hope this video has helped you out, and if you would like to see my ultimate guide on more than just picking the best game to start out with, then check out this video right here.